I am resident of Collinwood for YouTube, Joel Sage, joined by my buddy Patrick McCray, author of the Dark Shadows Daybook Unbound. We're here to discuss episode 1225 of 1841 Parallel Time. John Carlin does the narration for this bad boy. And what an opening. We get a little bit of a recap, but we get Sarah's skeletal remains, which is James Forsythe's sister, Sarah Forsythe, as I should say. You were talking before about Keith Prentice was being set up to play Barnabas, and if you want proof of that, look no further than.
Oh, I like Jewel. I would not say or publish anything that I had before. Everything I do is based on strictly guided, absolute nonsense, lies, chicanery, speculation, divination, and weirdness. No, there has never been any rational basis or evidence for anything I say, and I will die on that hill.
Well, there's a bit of evidence in this episode.
Oh my God, what is it? I've got to change my ways.
Pay very close attention to how Keith Prentice is playing James. Now, he's been playing James Forsythe for a couple episodes now. I think this is the third episode where he's playing James Forsythe. And he finds his sister's skeletal remains, and they're doing the recap a bit. And listen to his tone. It's very Barnabas-esque.
Barnabasian.
Right. No. Right. Again, I think if you want a hint to that Keith Prentice was possibly being set up to potentially play Barnabas, look no further than this episode.
I was accidentally perhaps right.
Well, it's really interesting because, I mean, again, I'm not saying he's playing Barnabas in this episode, but he's very much Barnabas in this episode. He's feeling sorry for not just himself, but for his sister Sarah, for the decision, for also the decision.
Sister Sarah. Yep. I mean, right there.
Well, for the decisions that James himself has made that sort of led to all this. But the person he does hate the most is Brutus Collins. And we actually do get the ghost of Brutus Collins debuting in this episode. Lewis Edmonds is in this episode.
He's great. His beard's never been pointier.
What did you think of Lewis Edmonds as Brutus Collins in this episode?
It's the other shoe falling. It's like, okay, now it's Dark Shadows. Now all is right with the world. There's Louis. He's in another wacky outfit, more extreme facial hair. Really warming up for Langley, who had some sort of 1950s scientist intellectual pointy beard.
I love Lewis Edmonds' facial expression. He's got these wide eyes because he tells James Forsythe to go back to his tomb. Really, really good facial expressions between Lewis Edmonds and James Forsythe. Great dialogue too. Don't get me wrong. The dialogue is really great between the two of them. Considering, it's not like they had a ton of time together during this arc, but the time they do get, they shine, both of them. I mean, they're really great.
I agree. But it was really welcome to see him in there too, a little earlier than I expected.
Well, I think too, like they had been teasing the ghost of Brutus for a while. We'd been hearing about Brutus throughout this entire arc, which is great. We always, again, you talked about this too. We get a lot of, when a character's, just because the character's not physically in the episode, they get mentioned, which keeps the character relevant. And they've been keeping Brutus relevant by mention. It's always been different characters like Justin Collins, Gabriel Collins. So, and, Julia, Quentin, everybody has mentioned Brutus at one form or another. And finally, we hear there's an evil spirit. We're sort of led to assume that originally, before we see the possession of Morgan as James Forsythe, we're led to believe that James Forsythe's the villain a bit. But we know the truth now with this episode, with not just this episode, but episodes prior, where you see Gabriel stab the portrait of Brutus. But with this episode, we finally get the reveal of Brutus, the ghost of Brutus Collins. And I love Carrie, Carrie Stokes. Kathy Cody comes running in the great house. She's like, Julia, Julia. She's like all scared. Oh my gosh.
With good reason.
Yeah.
Now, earlier you said teasing the ghost of Brutus Collins. Does that mean they have like a Ouija board and they start to talk to him and then run away? Like calling him on the phone? No, I'm just kidding, Jewel. I know what you meant. They knock on his coffin and his ghost appears and they're gone. It's like, oh, I will get you when I find out who it was.
What happened was they found an early copy of Monster Mash and they were playing it for him.
He would love that song. I think that would have really lightened his mood. It's like Buddy Boris Pickett will heal us all. I was the assistant at the Foster Brooks golf tournament in 1994.
Really?
No, 1996. I was the assistant to Buddy Boris Pickett and Alvy Moore, who was Hank Kimball on Green Acres, the county assessor, and I got him coffee, and he liked it black. And I wanted to talk to him about A Boy and His Dog, which was the Harlan Ellison dystopic future movie that he produced. And I didn't get a chance to.
Speaking of Kendrick, when we don't see when we don't see Bramwell knocking on the door, we see Kendrick knocking on the door. And before Kendrick can knock on the door opens, and there's Kendrick, and he wants to come in and talk to Melanie. Julia is taking Carrie back to the cottage to find out what's going on with Morgan, aka James Forsythe. And so,
Joel, how closely do you know DC Comics?
How close?
Yeah, do you know DC Comics fairly well?
I know this, that DC Comics, they did a I believe it was DC did oh my god, what was it,
something about a guy with a cape.
Yeah, Batman, Superman. Anyway, go ahead.
Well, do you have access to Google right now?
I could access it.
I want you and the viewers to look up a character, I believe, who was it was called the Toy Man. He was a villain. I think he was a Superman villain. And look at how he's dressed. And then look at Kendrick Young in this episode. He's totally dressed like I think it's the Toy Man, not the Toy Master, it's the Toy Man. And I'm pretty sure. And he's got the coat, the long coat with the big collar and the giant floppy tie. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
What the? Is Mr. Mixel-Pidlick going to show up next? I hope so.
Here's what I'm going to do when we get done with this video. Now, obviously, I'm not going to put that as our thumbnail, but when I tag you on Facebook and Twitter, I will post that picture on Twitter. That's with Kendrick, yes.
Separated at birth. And it'd be great if they were menacing David Selby in his Superman outfit from a few episodes back.
Right.
How much more Silver Age DC? Was the Elongated Man going to show up next? Adam Strange?
Oh, God. That is ironic. Now,
it's too close to be an accident, I hope.
Now, who do you think copied who here?
Oh, the Toy Man predated many women, but no, the Toy Man predated this by a long time.
Okay, so do you think because Dark Shadow, we've talked about this before with Cal Patofi. I think Cal Patofi was sort of a tribute to the Shadow.
Talk to the Hand.
Yeah. Well, the way he introduces himself as another person, as another identity, and he has agents, and so it's not unlike Dark Shadows to take from the comics, so I would not be shocked if they omit this.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It's really funny when I saw it tonight. And I just had this funny feeling that he's going to show up dressed like the Toy Man. Somehow that just was in the back of my mind. And there he is. It's that tie that really makes it.
It does. It like it. That's not John Carlin, but it sort of looks like Kendrick.
The hair.
And here's the thing too. Now, the Toy Man has a bit of facial hair. With Kendrick, now Kendrick has sideburns a bit. He doesn't have like a goatee, but I could see Kendrick rocking that goatee.
Well, sideburns are just a goatee that's gotten really scared.
Right.
And kind of split to either side of the face and it's hiding.
Well, see, basically, Charles Bronson's mustache was so scared of him, it didn't connect. But so.
You and I were in a band back in the 80s called Charles Bronson's Mustache. Do you remember that? You played the theremin.
I remember I played it horribly. Anyway, and that's why the band was short-lived. What did you think of Morgan Collins has been playing James Forsythe for now 3 episodes. What do you think of this character because again, this is a complete 180 from Morgan.
Most interesting character here. I mean, he's in a trance sometimes, he's a ghost sometimes, he's a man sometimes. Mm-hmm. He is a poo-poo platter of delight. With the flame of Keith Prentice's acting burning in the middle to heat the rumaki of storytelling that we will roast on little sticks. He's a great character. This is one of those characters that I want to see what he's going to do next. It's like call the show James Forsythe from now on.
Yeah, this is one of the most interesting characters too, that though we don't get him a lot of episodes, the episodes he's in, he matters. And really, it's like you said, it's a team effort. The writers and actor both make James Forsythe matter. I mean, we've been building to all these events, and finally we're getting something. And here's Morgan that is possessed by James Forsythe. And then again, I like how deceptive he is. He does not trust the Collins, and why should he? Because
he really casts some aspersions on the Collins here.
There's a great line by Keith Prentice's James Forsythe where he says, "Why are you not smiling, Mrs. Collins?" And he's talking to Julia, and Julia says, "There just isn't much to smile about." And he said, "It has always been thus." And I'm like, wow.
He's been watching Dark Shadows.
He has. He really has. We get
it's people like that I want to have show up when Mrs. Johnson, after like during 1995, and was talking about, it was such a sunny time. We were all having such a good time that summer. I was like, no one ever lived like that in Collinwood. This is a place where you go to get more depressed. Here's Vicky thinking, I was an orphan in poverty in the streets of New York. I'm like a 28-year-old orphan, living in this foundling home still, and singing "It's a Hard Knock Life," thinking life couldn't get much worse. And so I've come here, and now I just want to get back to the orphanage.
Somebody asked me, they said, why doesn't Dark Shadows have like a happy fairy tale ending? I'm like, have you not watched the show?
Because it has to be artistically consistent. They're not into twist endings. It's
like this show is not a fairy tale. God damn it! It's nowhere near a fairy tale.
It is not.
Like, listen, if you want a fairy tale, go to Disneyland and knock on their door. They'll give you one. But it's like the fairy tale. I'm just shaking my head when they said this to me. I'm like, no. I really like Kendrick and Melanie as a couple. Really great chemistry, obviously, between Nancy Barrett and John Carlin. I know they've played a couple before, but I really love these two right here. They're really made for each other. And I love how they're very, again, it's always important we see different people always coming together to be couples in Dark Shadows. Barnabas and Angelique, Jeremiah and Josette. And here you have
Aristide and Patofi.
Yeah, Aristide, yeah. And this you have Melanie and Kendrick. And I really love how Kendrick reveals to her, you were never at the orphanage. Yes, Justin Collins was a member of the board, but you were never there. What a reveal in this episode. Really good. What did you think?
Yeah, and it's interesting that we come back to the idea of an outsider who's kind of a Collins daughter.
Yeah.
But not, sort of, who's an orphan, who has issues of, potentially having been in an orphanage. And that I think it's interesting as we go on to look at the parallels between Melanie and Victoria. And, is Melanie, nuts? And would Victoria, if she had been taken in by the Collinses earlier, have gone just as crazy trying to make sense of this, Meshuggah house? And I don't know. There's got to be something there. I'm going to work on it.
I think if you put the importance of this arc is Melanie. Here's Melanie, who, like Victoria, does not know who her parents are. She was told a lie. She was told she was adopted. Victoria's been told, no one, we don't know who your parents are. We don't know, we don't know where your money came from. Yeah, that's bullshit. You do know. But with this, you have a moment of Melanie cared because I think that's the importance of this arc. Melanie cared very much before she ever finds out Justin is her actual father. She treats Justin like a father, and Justin treats her like a daughter because that is his daughter. And it's really as short of a time that the actor who played Justin Collins is on the show a lot, but the character is alive. You see this relationship between him and Melanie. It's brief, but it's there.
Joel, I want to ask you something. If you look over the history of Dark Shadows,
yeah,
and obviously it's about a family, so you got lots of parents and kids. Do more often than not, do you think fathers come off as the better parent than mothers?
I think the reason a lot of the moms come across as where the decision making turns off, because I think it depends on who the parent is. Because when we look at Roger grows up as a parent, like, to be fair, he's not
didn't have David when he was that young.
Right. He
evolves as a parent.
Right, yeah, right. He grows up. He evolves he doesn't start off as a good father, but he becomes a good father. And it's a great character trait. Now, I do think for the most part, the men seem more fitted for parenthood than some of the women do, because you have Joan Bennett, who's playing Elizabeth, who is the person who sends Victoria away. Apparently, we don't know the full reason why, because again, that's not given in the series. But yet she decides to hang on to Carolyn. So it comes across as you're sort of splitting hairs with some of the women, but with some of the men, we've seen, hell, before we find out Quentin's a dad, he's very much a father to Jameson.
Much more so than Edward in some ways.
Yeah, Edward.
Although Edward evolves.
Right. I'll tell you where Edward evolves really, really great. It's the episode where the kids are being burned in the room. And he goes, now we know Barnabas goes in the room and risks being exposed as a vampire even in this episode. But Edward really that's the episode you find out. Edward gives a shit about both kids.
This is a Louis Edmonds pattern.
Yeah.
You know, he starts out as a lousy dad.
Yeah.
Joshua, same thing.
Yep.
But they all, I don't know all, but I think they all have these turns where they wind up doing the right thing. That's I've had this theory for a long time that these actors are not really playing different parts, that they are playing one kind of symbolic character.
Yeah.
That just have different names when we go to different time periods and things like that. But if you take away the different names and you just look at them as either growing or exploring different parts of their personality, then you start to see patterns. You start to see a strange consistency. And the Louis Edmonds story, almost karmically over and over again, seems to be about a guy, with Bruce notwithstanding, is about a sort of self-involved father, really set on certain expectations, even if it's the expectation that I never wanted to be a father, I got to get out of this, which is Roger. And they learn, they transform, especially when they see their kids in peril.
Yeah.
And they realize who they have within them.
Right. I agree with you here. And here's why too. Here's your real evidence here too, is Joshua Collins is what? He's a Collins. Now his kids both die in the sense. Sarah does die and Barnabas becomes an undead vampire who gets chained up. But he ends up caring about his son because he realized Joshua lives to realize he's lost everything around him. He still has his wealth, but he doesn't have his wife, he doesn't have his daughter, and now he doesn't have his son because he just had to chain his son up. It takes losing all that for him to become a better man, to become a better father than he ever was,
Yeah, and the only thing he can do to hold on to that, it's very selfish, but it's also very loving in a weird way, is he can't kill Barnabas.
Right, and I don't think that's so much Joshua giving into Angelique's curse as it is God. I think Joshua comes to the realization of what he's been too. That I've been this shit dad and I have not been a great father. I need to be a better man. And if I can let my son live in that process, and maybe I don't know what the future holds, so he chains him up. Now, as it goes along, you see Edward, who again doesn't start off as a great dad either. But again, even though Edward's not directly descended from Joshua because he's not his kid,
and he has a mustache.
But he does have the Collins bloodline in him. And I do think that's important when you're looking at these characters, because what does Roger have? The Collins bloodline. So I do think there's a connection that way where they're in a sense playing similar types with different names, like you're saying, because they're Collinses.
Sure. And so that brings us back to Melanie and Kendrick, or the John Carlin and the Nancy Barrett. And, this is their final evolution. Yeah. This is the final stage. And, if you sort of look at the initial Carolyn Willie encounters and, what a, sort of threatening butterfingered weirdo, emotionally, tone deaf weirdo that Willie is. And that he evolves so much, and Carolyn grows up too.
Yeah.
And then they grow up through these different people, and it's like Carolyn finally has to be Victoria, and be totally out of the Collinses, and then back in. I think Nancy Barrett spends as much time as not a Collins as she does a Collins. Pansy Faye, Letitia Faye, Melanie.
Also, she plays Trask's daughter, Charity.
Well, yeah, Charity begins at home.
Yep. And I think that's the thing too with with her and Willie's relationship in 1970 parallel time, what you really saw was two people who really did love each other. Look at when Willie Loomis jumps to protect Barnabas's secret, and look how distraught Carolyn really is over his death. And it's one of the most I mean, there's a lot of heartbreak in DS, you know this, but it's really a heartbreaking episode.
That's, and moments like that are the reward for going through a storyline that maybe is not as good as some of the other storylines. Because in the midst of all of that, you get these moments that completely justify all of it.
Right. I think, again, I don't think when I looked at the Judah Zacher arc, it's really good because it has, again, with Dark Shadows, there's always consequence for action in every arc. So the consequence for, Willie Loomis keeping said secret is death. And here's Carolyn, who has to sort of suffer that consequence, the aftermath of that consequence, by realizing her husband's dead. And it's really just a great episode and really great acting. Great writing, too. Don't get me wrong. It just, a lot of really great stuff goes on in DS. And here, too, what you have with Melanie and Kendrick is here's this woman who thinks she's this outsider. She has said continuously, I'm not a Collins, and you believe her. She's as believable as Victoria was, as Alexandra was. And so I think that's the important thing too. With orphans, Kathleen Lee Scott played a great orphan in 1897. Now here you have Nancy Barrett playing an orphan, and what a performance she gives between Kendrick, with her and Kendrick. Give me one moment, I'll be right back. Okay, sorry about that.
No.
But really great chemistry between Kendrick and Melanie, and they're just a great couple. And I love how you get this reveal that she wasn't in the orphanage, and I love the interaction later between Julia and Kendrick in the drawing room. And we're going to have a little fun later too, because Melanie's going to come down and she's going to be crazy.
Yeah, what is how long has she been like this? Is that what he says? Is this normal? Happen all the time?
Yeah, he what is wrong with her? And it's, if this is a great way to answer to the audience, okay, is Kendrick for real with caring about Melanie? And this episode answers it too. If you didn't like from an audience standpoint, you could sort of feel, well, those other episodes kind of answer. To me, this episode cements it.
Yeah.
Really great job by the writers, and again by John Carlin. And I love Nancy Barrett, how she's possessed. It's the same way she's, oh my God, she's Amber, I believe, in this possession.
Yes.
Really great. I love too how we don't see Quentin in this episode, but he is mentioned.
Yes, he is.
So what's your favorite scene from this episode?
Oh, I mean, the revelations about Sarah.
Yeah.
Kathy Cody.
Yeah.
Again. Just the skeleton.
Yeah.
There is, when I was a kid, and of course I grew up in, the 1830s, it was a more innocent time, but genuinely, when I was a kid, skeletons were scary.
Yeah.
That was, we didn't have a lot of other monsters, and skeletons at Halloween were a real staple, and they were scary as all get out. And Dark Shadows manages to just talk to the 3 and 4-year-old in me about how and why they're scared. Every time the skeletons appear, especially that one with the weird jaw, that they keep bringing out, it for me it has a lot of weight, which skeletons normally don't have. By the way, Drew, a skeleton walks into a bar. He asks for a beer and a mop.
Yeah, it's really, really great what they do here too. That when the skeleton, I love how they shoot this. They shoot it from the ground up. You see the skeleton first, and
Yeah.
then you see Keith Prentice as James Forsythe in Morgan's body, and he's talking about Bruce. He says he thought no one would find you, but I found you, and you will receive a proper burial. And he does. Keith Prentice, as James Forsythe, does ask Julia Collins to give Sarah a proper burial, and they do, which is nice. You're getting a lot of payoff in this one episode, and you're still getting the intrigue as well. Even though we're nearing the end, still a great job by the writers.
We have about 20 episodes left?
Yeah, 1,245.
But this episode had sort of a strange numerological weight, because overall there are 1,225 episodes. Yeah. And we hit episode 1,225, and so it almost feels like we're on an extra life in a video game now.
We are. Dan Curtis is inserting the quarters, and we thank him for it.
Where's he putting them? I don't see Barbara Steele. So what else is going on? Yes. What's happening in the background?
Yeah. I know. Is there? Let me try to think. I think we covered everything. Is there anything you want to add about this episode?
No, I mean, I stick to my guns of the most interesting thing going on here is the idea of a ghost now possessing someone, and who's not Patrick Swayze, and or Whoopi Goldberg, whoever he possesses in that damn thing, and going on, and as Whoopi Goldberg becoming James Forsythe, and really having an agenda, and that this is a cosmic agenda he couldn't deal with in death, and that this is a ghost who's been waiting to do that. And I love that. I want to see, again, I want to see what this character does next. He's kind of hijacked the series. I couldn't be happier.
Yeah, and I think really too with this episode, you get a great payoff by actually seeing the ghost of Brutus and a confrontation between James and Brutus a bit. Really, this in a sense, even though we're not going to get the flashback for another, I think, 11 episodes, this sort of sets up that flashback in a sense. I know it's a ways off, but it's sort of a peek. I'm not going to spoil it of what's going to happen in the past, but it's a really good peek. And it's a really great interaction between Lewis Edmonds and Keith Prentice. I just want to say,
on Dark Shadows.
Yep. Great job by the writers and actors. Great job.
Only on Dark Shadows do you do foreshadowing of something that's going to happen in the past.
Yep, absolutely.
It's like, and yet it makes sense.
It does. That's the thing too. Like Dark Shadows, when they foreshadow something that's going to happen in the past, it always turns out making sense because you had these great writers and you had great performers to pay off the writing. And
certainly do.
Just a fabulous series. I was telling people about, hey, the anniversary of Barnabas is coming up.
Now, do you celebrate the air date or the taping date?
I celebrate the the 18th is what I celebrate. So,
I celebrate because how the day book was written. I celebrate the taping date, and the taping date is my birthday.
Cool.
April 14th.
Yeah. Cool. But Patrick, buddy, it is always a pleasure. How is Tuesday for you?
It is the greatest day on any calendar that will ever exist.
I will see you Tuesday night, sir. But great episode, guys. If you haven't checked out 1841 Parallel Time, I know we're not done yet with these episodes, but go check it out. It is well worth your time. And also go pick up the Dark Shadows Table of Bell. Link's going to be in the description box for that one. Patrick, buddy, you have a great night and enjoy the rest of your Easter, buddy.
Simsalabim.
Goodbye. Bye.